Hello everyone, this is Dr. Sara Mashayekh, and in this video I'm going to share with you the results of my research on a sociocultural approach to task design. Now, why task design, you might ask? So task design is a very complex, highly recursive and often messy process. And the thing is, tasks are very important in every curriculum. So they are basically the building blocks of the curriculum. And given that this process is very complex and messy, we have to really dig deeper and understand what are the important aspects of task design and what are the things that determine a design of a successful task. This research project that I'm going to talk to you about, this was a huge project that had different areas of focus done throughout several years, and the result that I'm going to discuss and share with you here are going to be only focused on one aspect of my research. So the bigger research project was about learner agency, learners positioning, learner orientation, power dynamics, and group arrangements, also task negotiation. But the part that I'm going to focus on in this video is successful task design. So how can we design successful tasks? What are successful tasks? And what are the components, what are the things that we need to have in mind when we are designing tasks? As I said, tasks are building blocks of curriculum. So if you know how to design tasks that are successful, then we are going to be able to answer part of the question of how to design a good, effective curriculum. Let me give you some background about my research and where the data is coming from. The data collected for this research comes from a project called TEAL project, Tools to Enhance Assessment Literacy. And this project was designed to enhance the assessment literacy of key stakeholders, meaning parents, students, teachers, schools, task designers who are involved with ESL or EAL learning. This project was designed and run by Victoria government, and it focuses on secondary schools in Melbourne, Australia. The data I collected and analyzed for this research came from three different sources. One was learners' performance, which were recorded videos of classroom-based oral assessment tasks that came in a variety of forms. There were individual, paired, and group assessment tasks. And we had 38 videos, and all these videos ranged from 7 to 11 minutes. They were all based in secondary schools in Melbourne. The second source was interview with task designers. So for these videos, I've used 9 tasks to elicit learners' performance. So these 9 tasks were designed by 4 highly experienced EAL teachers, teacher educators, task designers, 2 male, 2 female, and I had a long chat with each of these task designers to elicit their opinions, what they wanted to achieve, and looking at the videos that we had of the performance of students, whether or not these videos align with what they designed the task, why they designed the task, and what they wanted to get out of that task. The third source was the tasks themselves. So we had 9 tasks. They were all used to elicit responses from students. They are up on a TEAL website, and they were, again, a range. We had persuasive, imaginative, and informative tasks. Now, how do we define success in tasks? In this study, we had 3 factors that helped us define success in task. One was alignment between learners' performance and task designers' intentions. So the performance that we get out of learners, how well does it align with what task designers had in mind when they designed the task? The second one was authenticity. So the performance we get from students should be authentic. It shouldn't be a formulated response. And also the amount of balance between variety and commonality. And what we mean by this is when we aim for authentic responses from students, because students can be quite agentic and do their own thing with the task, there's going to be variety, which is a good thing to some extent in any assessment performance. I said to an extent because if we want to be able to assess our students, we need some commonality because we have to have some commonality because we are assessing our students based on the rubric. So if there is no commonality between the responses that we get from our students, how are we going to be able to assess them? So because of that reason, we always need a balance between variety and commonality. So that was our third factor in defining success in a task. In this study, I've used a performance framework that I proposed back in 2019 as the framework for the research. As you can see, in the first activity system, we have task designers as the subject, and with everything else that goes on in an activity like designing a task with tools and methods, rules and community, the outcome that they are aiming for is tasks. They are designing a task, and this outcome is used in the second activity system to elicit performance from the students. So we also have learners, and the outcome of the second activity system is learners' actual performance. So based on what I explained here, the sources of data collection should make sense now, because we have task designers. We also have the task which was used by our learners to perform with that task. So we have videos of our students performing these tasks. We've got the tasks themselves, and we've got data coming from task designers, and how this data really comes in together and triangulate our data collection and inform our findings and results. The findings of this study show that there are three important factors in task design, and this is basically what I want to argue that every task designer and curriculum designer should be aware of and should have in mind when they are designing any task or curriculum. And specifically, I'm talking here about EAL, ESL curriculum. So we have the first category is task designers' decisions. We have learner sensitivity, and we have designed in scaffolding. And we are going to talk about each category individually, and we're going to look at some examples from the data. So the first factor is decisions made by task designers. And these decisions start even before you start designing a task as a task designer. So when you are thinking about designing a task, first you have to think about your overall purpose. And this is the general purpose that links back to the curriculum. So what does the curriculum want to achieve, and how does your task really tie in to the curriculum and help you achieve that purpose? Then we have a specific purpose. So what specific kind of purpose do you have for that task? What kind of response do you want to elicit from the students? What are your intentions? What are your expectations for the students' performance? While you're doing this, it is very important to think about and also work with the stakeholders. The stakeholders that you are working with are probably organization, understanding the purpose, understanding what they want to achieve. The teachers who have the experience of teaching that type of concept, and they know how things might unfold. And also the learners, because these are going to be the group that are going to should be able to understand your task and then perform the task. So when you are designing a task, you have to really think about how can this task benefit students in their learning journey linked to the curriculum purpose coming from the organization that you're working with. Also ask yourself, can you articulate your purpose, both the overall purpose and a specific purpose? What are the expectations, orientation to the task that you are designing? So these all really help you understand what are you going to design, how are you going to design it, and understanding the purpose behind it is also going to help you design the task, a more clearly designed task. And also, can you articulate the logic behind it, as I just explained? So these all help you, not only you, but in the future, the students who are going to analyze these tasks and perform the task, is going to help you and them understand the task, and it help you create a better alignment between what you are asking them to do and them understanding your intentions from that task design. To add to what we just discussed, research shows that expert designers start with making higher level decisions about the task before they think about lower level decisions. They also predict how the task would unfold in practice. So this speaks to what we just explained, starting with higher order thinking about what is the curriculum, what does it want to achieve, and then design tasks based on our purposes from the curriculum, and thinking about going down and thinking about, okay, what is it exactly that we intend to elicit from students? So everything that we talked about on the previous slide is going to fit into our decisions around what kind of task do we want to design, how do we want to design it, and why are we designing it. Now, the second important factor here is learner sensitivity. So understanding who we are designing for, because it's just like in a presentation, this is like understanding who your audience is. So that's the first thing you do in a presentation. This is exactly the same. So the tasks that you are designing them for someone. Those some people, those are your audience. So it is important for you to understand who you are designing for, what their background knowledge is, what their prior experiences are, and also having a good understanding of the social and cultural background they're coming from, their educational system. And sometimes in this educational system, political viewpoints come in, because education is also political. It is social, it is cultural, but it is also political. So understanding these differences, how these differences could make a difference in what does it mean for you as a task designer. So based on their experiences, background knowledge, experiences, but also their social and cultural and educational, the differences in educational, social, cultural, and political systems. What does it mean for you as a task designer, and how should you approach task design differently if you have students coming from different backgrounds or having different knowledge and prior experiences? Now let's go ahead and have a look at an example of learn sensitivity, and this example feeds into the second point that we had, prior knowledge and prior experience. So the task that we had was talk to your group about the information your graph shows or does not show. So this is the task the students got, and then there was this water cycle graph that students had to talk about. And then the task really didn't work. Students couldn't complete the task successfully. So there was a complete misalignment between what task designers intended to achieve and what they could achieve by the students' performance. So we went back to the task designers, and I asked one of them, why do you think this didn't work? And what she told me was very interesting. She said one of the things that we tried to get students was asking questions from one another. And in school context, teacher asks questions, students questions, and students give the answer, and the student ability to ask questions could be very limited. So although they are hearing these questions, so this is the key point, because you don't have a lot of opportunities to ask those more higher order questions. So students have the opportunity to ask questions, but not these higher order questions. These higher order questions most of the times are asked by teachers. You think that you have questions modeled at them day in and day out, and yet it comes to when it comes to doing it themselves, it's quite difficult for students. So formulation of questions is quite difficult. because most of the times it is teachers who is asking these questions from the students. So students get really good at answering those questions, but they're not good at asking the questions. So this is their prior knowledge. This is what they're experiencing. They experience a lot of questions being asked of them, but they don't experience a lot of themselves asking questions. So that's what makes it very difficult for them to complete this task. So if we understand this point about their prior experiences and their prior knowledge, then it is easier for us to understand what kind of task, what task design might work or what might not work in practice. So this prior understanding, prior knowledge is not just the level of students, but it is what they experience doing a lot and what they don't have a lot of experience doing. And we know from research that expert designers are more context and learner sensitive. So they try to understand the learners, where they're coming from, what their experiences were, and they're also how their social and cultural and political and educational background works, and what these differences mean for them as task designers. Now, we're moving into the third important factor, and this is designed in scaffolding. So we're talking about the scaffolding designed in the task, that the scaffolding that helps students understand the task, analyze it, and then go step by step. And things that we figured out are very important in design of a task. And this data mainly is coming from the analysis of the tasks and the comparison between how the task was designed and how the students performed the task, and how well that performance was aligned with the intentions of task designers. So tasks that had a very explicit purpose, they were more successful. So purpose should be made explicit to the students. Instructions need to be straightforward. They need to be clear. So when we're designing a task, we need to avoid giving vague and general instructions. So the language we're using and the instructions are very important. Instructions should not be too long. So what I found was the longer the instructions, the less students really understood, the less effectively students understood them. Expected structures should be made clear. So we need to make it clear to the students what we expect of them in their responses. Expected activity should be broken down into steps and stages. So if we are giving them these step-by-step instructions, it is more effective than when we are writing 2 paragraphs as instructions. So we are going to get a better response that aligns better with our intentions if we give them steps and stages. Tasks should provide all the resources necessary. So if our students need to use a specific kind of language, if they need to use specific topics that they might not know about, and we haven't discussed in previous tasks, so we need to make sure that we are providing them with all the necessary information they need to complete a task. If they don't know the language, if they don't know what kind of questions they need to ask, if they don't know what topics they need to talk about, then they're not going to be able to complete the task. And this is especially true about lower level students, students with lower level of language proficiency. Important parts of the instructions should be highlighted and foregrounded, so they know exactly what is the most important thing they need to take into account. These key instructions should not be presented as an add-on and optional or secondary in terms of importance. They should be really highlighted. Time limit set by task should be aligned with the expected activity. And this might not look very serious, but we are going to look at some examples of how this time limit that is set by task could result in performance that is not aligned with what we are expecting our students to do. Then tasks should also facilitate intersubjectivity. And I didn't use this word, but I talked about this concept of students being able to interpret and understand the task that we design. So this is what we mean by intersubjectivity, a common understanding between the designers and learners. So if you are designing a task, can you let your students, the learners, understand, make it very clear and easy to understand for your learners what you are intending, what you're asking them to do. So this common understanding is going to be very important, because if your students, the learners, do not understand what the task is requiring them to do, then they're not going to be able to do it. So one last point here is, make sure when you design a task to test drive the task and identify possible flaws in the task and fix them. And these flaws, we are talking about what we have included in the task as scaffolding. Okay, I promised that we're going to look at some tasks with some flaws in them and talk about how students perform these tasks and what went wrong. So let's look at this task where student A and B are friends. Student A begins by explaining the problem and asking for advice. So it is going to be student A talking about a problem they are having, and then student B listens to the problem, responds talking about his or her own experience, and they discuss the situation and ideas about how to solve this problem and what to do next. And the task is asking students to talk for 5 to 7 minutes to complete the role play. Now, let's go ahead and look at how this task performance of students unfolds. So as you can see here, we've got this task done between student A and B in only 5 turns. So student A talks about a problem they are having with a school concert and a family obligation, and them not being able to decide what to do. And then student B gives a solution. Student A thinks that student A is making a good point, and student B is making a good point, and then they just decide that that's the best option, just in 5 turns, and this was under 35 seconds. So remember, the task was asking these students to go on for 5 to 7 minutes. So the task broke down because the time expectation was not realistic. Here's another example of the same task where different students, and what we have here is, as you can see, so many turns. Student A again is talking about a concern and family obligation happening at the same time. Student B gives advice. Student A decides to sustain the conversation by asking the same question again and again, although student B has already said, I think this school concert is more important, so go to school concert. And then what happens is, at the very end, you can see here, student B says, you ask the same question over and over again in different ways. And student A is saying, you have to. So they are aware that they are repeating the same idea. They are just repeating themselves. But because of the time obligation, they just go on and on and on talking about this exactly the same thing. Here's another example, and this is a different task, but again, the same concept. So it is talk to your group about the information your graph shows or does not show. And time limit is surprisingly 1 lesson period. So they have to talk about this for about an hour. What happens is student A and B run out of things to talk about, and they go off topic. So the teacher has to come in and say, let's go back to talking about the graph. So they have the teacher has to jump in and ask them to go back to the topic they started to talk about. What happens here is these students just go off topic because they run out of ideas to talk about. So with this time limit, we had 3 different reactions from students. They completely ignore the time limit and complete the conversation in 30-35 seconds, or they keep repeating the same thing, which is not really helping them to improve in their conversation. So they're just repeating the same thing, or they go off topic because they run out of things to talk about. So talking about the third factor that determines the success of a task, Research is telling us that problems concerning with the students' quality of talk are often related to undetected design flaws in the specific tasks used, just like you saw in the examples we talked about. So, reiterating the important findings of this study, when we are designing tasks, which also applies to designing curriculum, some of these, we have to be very careful with the decisions we are making sure that everything aligns with the curriculum and our purpose. Learner sensitivity is very important, understanding who we are designing for and also how we are designing the task itself with the scaffolding that we're providing for the students. And this framework that I proposed in 2020 as a result of these findings could really come in handy when you are designing tasks. So when you're designing tasks, you have to make sure that you understand how you are designing tasks, but also task interpretation and the relationship between what you are designing and how the students, your learners, are going to interpret those tasks based on their previous experiences and where they're coming from is important. And also the task is important, the context where the task is performed in is important, which of course I didn't really present the findings on this, which has to do with the interaction between students and their power relations, their orientation and their positioning in the task. I hope you found these findings interesting, and I hope you can use them in practice when you are designing curriculum and tasks. Thank you for listening to this video, and get in touch if you have any questions.